Welcome to the Career Chronicles. So excited to have you with us, and especially excited to have our wonderful guest, Sabrina Shafer, on the podcast with us. Before we dive into introducing her, just wanted to tell a little bit about what the Career Chronicles is all about in case this is your first time joining us. I am a technical recruiter, and I have often heard from the hiring managers that I partner with that they want to hire more women in tech. And while I love this idea of building more diverse teams, I wanted to take a deeper dive into looking at what are the issues that prevent us from recruiting and retaining women at the same rate as men, and how can we showcase the stories and lessons that other women have learned to help fight against some of those things. So thank you for joining us, and we're excited to have Sabrina on here to share her insights with us. Sabrina, I'm going to introduce you to everybody. Thank you for being here. Want to read a little bit about Sabrina's background. She is the CEO of Transformation Continuum and has been doing that for about 4 years. This is a pipeline acceleration energy for the technology industry. And from building unbeatable route to market strategies and executing on them within weeks to driving profitable practice acceleration, enablement, and seamless technical delivery, Continuum completely reshaped how the industry grows by consolidating what traditionally required multiple companies. So instead of navigating countless companies for market research, marketing, training, and enablement, and professional services, organizations can come to Continuum and save complexity, cost, time, redundancy, and potential pain points in the future. So it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from a CEO, a woman CEO, and a leader of your own business. And I know we've talked about the importance of cultivating diversity on your own team. So I'm excited today to dive into hiring and interviewing and talk about those things. Before I do that, I'll just share some of the places Sabrina has spoken. I know you've spoken with Intel numerous times, Dell numerous times, Cisco, AWS, Forbes, so on and so forth. You're the author of several books and guides. You're the real deal. I'm so excited to have you on here. You run your own LinkedIn live sessions, which I got to be a part of. And I think our episode's coming out next month. So everybody will have to check that out. And you're just an incredible leader in this industry. And I'm excited to have you on the podcast. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and all the compliments. I'm flattered.
The best part about coming on a podcast is all the compliments that you get to have. Yeah. So let's talk about how we got connected. How did we find each other? Do you even recall? Because it was a while ago.
Yeah. So we had a mutual friend, and it's so interesting, and I'm sure you see this in your role all the time, how much connections foster and cultivate more connections, So it was a mutual friend of ours. Shout out to Chris Williams. I think he's over at HashiCorp.
He is. He gets shouted out a lot on this podcast because he has connected me to probably 20 people. And, like you said, the power of networking, it's a snowball effect.
Yeah, 100%. And he said, hey, I think you are two pretty incredible women. Might make sense for you guys to connect. And I'm glad you did. So.
Yeah, he's a good example of the power of allies in this space. And that's something that I've tried to incorporate into the podcast as we talk about women in leadership and women's advancement professionally. It requires male allies. And so I've tried to bring on those folks onto the podcast as well. So it's not just women that are sharing their insights here at Career Chronicles. It's men too. We've had some great guests in the past, and Chris will be coming on in the future as well. So excited that we got connected. Tell me about the company you run and about the team you've cultivated there.
Yeah. So, and thank you for that intro. So you kind of got a little overview, but from a little taste, but from a very high level, we work with some of the largest organizations in the world, including the 4 largest hyperscalers and their ecosystem, including distribution and their channel, traditional VARs, SIs, GSIs. If you're not in the tech world, that is a bunch of gobbledygook nonsense. But what we do is we help succinct messaging. So a lot of times you see acquisitions or new solutions come out and you go, what does this mean? What's the business relevance of this technology? We help hone that down. And then we help get those organizations to market in a matter of weeks. So you're seeing a lot of these acquisitions. We're helping with most of them that you're seeing out there. And then helping enable both their internal teams across sales, engineering, marketing, and leadership, as well as, like I mentioned, their channel and their ecosystem. So a lot of the alliances and partnerships that you're seeing, NVIDIA is a great example, helping folks really understand what's their AI strategy, what's their AI message, and then how do they partner with folks like an NVIDIA so that they can go to market with a stronger message.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're meeting organizations at really critical points. Like these could be high stakes situations and turning points in the history and future for these organizations. So with the work that you're doing being so high stakes, why is it important to you to cultivate a diverse team to tackle these projects for companies?
I mean, starting with myself, when I got into tech, I was a behavioral analyst, which just is a fancy way of saying my job was to understand why people do what they do and get them to do more of what I wanted them to do and less of what I didn't want them to do. And I was training school districts and neuropsychologists and hospitals, and working with primarily children with special needs, but really understanding the foundations of human behavior. And I had a clinic at the time, and one of the gentlemen who had his child in my clinic said, would you please consider getting into, tech leadership? Would you please consider it? So about 8 quarters later of me saying no, he finally convinced me with an incredible offer. And here we are. And I was able to, myself and, the team that, I was able to grow and build, were able to double the size of that business in about 2.5 years. And since then, gone on to run multi-million-dollar practices, and then of course start Continuum, who's now a multi-million-dollar company. So diversity is incredibly important to me. I think as you're seeing the tech industry really try to differentiate, cut through the noise. There's a lot of noise right now. No one's going to be surprised when I say, we have a shorter attention span now, folks have more to learn. They have less time to learn it, less resources to learn it, especially as we're seeing a lot of these layoffs. So really helping them understand information takes a very unique skill set. And, as a former litigator, as a former attorney, my job was to take very complex information and relay it in a very simple and compelling way to a jury who had never spent one day in law school, know, and frankly, they shouldn't know the law the way, lawyers should. So that's a great example of how you're looking for diverse talent. You're looking for skills. And Warren Buffett talks about that all the time. You're looking for character. So I will tell you, our team is insanely diverse. And it's not always something I'm looking for. I don't go, okay, are you a diverse candidate? Yes or no. What I'm looking for are really core characteristics of those people. And of course, there's skill sets too that I'm looking for, which just so happen to be very often from very diverse candidates.
Are there certain values you're looking for when you say characteristics? Or character? How do you define that?
Absolutely, there is. I am looking for, and a lot of it, again, just because of my background, it's the subtle cues that you get in folks' behavior. I'm looking at their responsiveness. I'm looking at how cohesive their response is. Did it address what we were talking about? Are there details that are missed? Do they have sort of the reciprocity, the human element that they can work well on a team? Something I've learned over the years is there's nothing more important than how well your teams work together. Because if they're not working well together, your customers are going to suffer. And if there's not a strong culture, your customers are going to suffer, as well as your entire team. So I'm looking for those kinds of aspects. What kind of values do they have? What's important to them? Do they show up the way they say they're going to show up? Are they showing up late consistently? Are they missing deadlines consistently? A lot of times that reflects, and for different reasons, sometimes that reflects maybe they've got other stuff going on in their life, or maybe they don't value things that are important to Continuum. So those are the kinds of values and characteristics that I'm looking for.
How do you measure those things in an interview? I know you've mentioned some ideas already about, do they show up on time? Are they answering questions fully and comprehensively? But are there ways that you create questions that you ask every time in an interview to measure some of those things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the first things I do is I focus on open-ended questions and I see where they take the question. So, and this is pretty common, but it's a good way to kind of see what's important to them. So I always want to know the human element first. There's a reason that you've now, are interviewing with me. Most likely you're going to be a leader at the organization. Otherwise it likely wouldn't come to my desk. Maybe it would. So I'm looking for, are you, when I might ask, for instance, so tell me about yourself. I would love
to the classic kickoff question.
The classic kickoff. But it's something that's incredibly important to me.
Yeah.
If you're going to start with, maybe something that's a little bit more negative, or they're going to start with maybe they don't know as well, like about them.
Yeah.
So we're very confident and understand their capabilities and where there's areas for them to learn and to grow.
Because in your business, they're helping understand organizations and helping them grow. So if you can't even reflect and understand yourself, it's not going to be the right fit for Continuum. That's probably true for a lot of businesses, especially if you're in this consulting and organizational leadership space. So I talk about this all the time with candidates about how important that tell me about yourself question is. And you hit on a lot of things that we point out to candidates, that you don't want to be negative in any part of the interview, but you definitely on the, when you're kicking off the interview, you don't want to be negative about your current or former employer. That is a red flag to a lot of interviewers because they wonder if that's a pattern that you have is negativity. And then you have to be able to tell your own story and know yourself and be an expert on what are your strengths and impact you've made that you would bring to this position. And that's it. I mean, it's really it's that simple, which I know it doesn't feel simple because everybody struggles with that question. But if you can answer, why do you want to be in this business? What impact have you made and what would you bring here? That'd be a stellar answer to the tell me about yourself question.
And I'm sure that every hiring manager has a different expectation of what they're looking
for.
I want to know about things that are important to you, like your family or your pet or your hobbies, things that are exciting to you. And most of the time I will ask questions like, tell me what excites you. Tell me about your best dream job. Because I want to know those things. And the other thing that you hit on, I'm not necessarily looking for, it's not like they can't say anything negative in the interview,
right?
For honesty. And
rather than like bashing or blaming. Like I think blaming is where you get into the pitfall.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm looking for, is there a fair amount of self-reflection? Because no matter what you're doing, what role you're in, you're going to need to reflect and grow. I mean, we have a principle at Continuum where we talk about what we call investment blocks, where we literally, each person in the company takes an hour of paid time a week and invests in a skill that they're focused on, including myself. And sometimes an hour isn't even enough, but it's just that important that you're blocking out time to really invest and learn a skill or grow in an area. Otherwise, what are we doing? That's one of the most important parts about someone at our company is, are you an avid learner and do you enjoy learning?
Okay. So this practice actually ties into Continuum's culture at its core, is attracting candidates that are curious and, lifelong learners. And so that's part of why you have this setup, this investment block. So how have you seen having that investment block result in being able to hire better talent that's a better fit for Continuum? And how have you seen it retain better talent and keep people invested in here with you for the long haul?
It's, we have a very difficult job. There's a reason that the world's largest companies hire us, for years on end. We were just
solving their most challenging problems that they couldn't themselves tackle.
Or at least not in the amount of time that they need to tackle.
They needed to.
If you don't have an AI strategy, now
you're behind.
You're behind. So what do you do? I mean, in a lot of cases, we're retained for years out. Because of the impact that this has. So if, you're looking for that level of grit in someone and that level of, I might not have the answer right now, but I'm going to get it. And I'm going to get the right answer and the right people to the table to solve your problem. And so that's incredibly important, like I said, those questions I'm asking during the interview for those candidates that we do hire. And then from a retention standpoint, I have noticed that is one of those two factors, your eager, or curiosity to learn and to grow. And second, your ability to just figure it out, that attitude, it's a drive to just say, I might not know the answer, but I'm going to figure it out. Maybe not always by yourself. That's why we have a team, and that's why we have resources. Exactly. But I have found that people are not successful, at least at Continuum, if they don't have those two traits. And those who have been with us from the very beginning. I mean, we have very, very low attrition rate for that.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know, since you work with some of the largest organizations in the country, if not the globe, how easily do you think it would be for companies like that to implement some of the things that you've done at the granular level with your culture at Continuum? Because I often see small businesses, especially women-owned and led businesses, able to create these great cultures that foster diversity, foster low attrition, lifelong learning. They help the employees feel bought in and less burnt out. How easily could some of these things be adopted by these humongous companies?
And frankly, I see it with some of these large companies where they are doing it right. You're always going to have pockets where you're not necessarily doing it right. And sometimes it's just not a good fit. We've all heard the horror stories of some of these large companies that, work people, nonstop, and they're just, it's like a revolving door of talent. And it works for them. They're very successful for that reason. I think some things, process gets in the way. I'm very familiar with a lot of the hiring practices of some of these larger organizations, and it is harder to have those kinds of, because a lot of the questions I'm asking have more of a subjective interpretation.
It takes a higher level of commitment from you as the hiring manager to assess and reflect on those interview responses and do that in a standardized way for everyone that you speak to in an interview setting. That's a high ask of you. Whereas with some of the larger enterprises that I've partnered with on the recruiting side of things, they have maybe a recorded video interview, and this very cold interview process that feels very like taking a multiple choice test to try to assess your abilities. And but it's quicker, and it's the only way that they can power through the amount of hiring that they need to do. Sometimes it's just not feasible, but I'm curious. It seems like when it is doable, you're seeing some companies implement it.
I think what I've noticed is it really depends on how important a culture is to the organization and how important retention of talent is to an organization. There are some, and they're very successful, where it just matters less to them, and that's okay. It's not how I run my organization, but that's how they run theirs. So I've noticed that is one of probably the leading indicators of organizations that are less inclined to kind of put that kind of those
effort into that. Yeah. And to your point, if what they're doing is working for them, then I see why there might not be a motivation to change that. I mean, that makes sense. It boils down to revenue and success in that way. I think we've tackled a lot of what I wanted to ask you, but something I wanted to summarize from your earlier point about what you look for when you're hiring is it sounds like you make a commitment to lay the groundwork for the culture of your team at the interview stage. And I think that's really important to draw people's attention to, that building a good team culture starts at the recruiting level. It starts with who you choose to speak to and what you choose to speak to them about and how you assess them and their fit for your team. And I think you even said it earlier, because if the teamwork isn't working, you're not going to get good performance or good results.
I've had this exact thing blow up in my face. Not, one huge blow up, not at Continuum, but at a previous organization. I was interviewing several people. I had several positions that were open. And one person, it was a diverse candidate, had a rock star. I was leading sales for an organization, and had a rock star, track record, had a great book of business. but just seemed off for our
Okay.
team. Just seemed off. Seemed very entitled, a little bit nasty and short, very arrogant, extremely arrogant, and just sort of belittling to her peers. Because I was hiring a couple other people that she was familiar with. And I was like, well, okay, let's give it a shot. You know, at the time I reported to the VP of sales, and he said, well, let's give it a shot. She's got a good book of business. And I will tell you, she single-handedly blew up a big part of our sales team, because she was kind of weaving into conversations and instilling doubt and breaking things up. And I later left the organization, but and she has since as well. But I talked to somebody who is a leader over there, and he said it's never been the same since we've hired her. It was awful.
Yeah.
So one bad apple. Now, they weren't a huge company, you know, they're not the, you know, Fortune 50s or 100s or anything like that.
Right.
But one bad hire can be very expensive, especially for some of these, you know, medium to small businesses. And frankly, even in these enterprise, you know, or commercial sized companies, where you maybe don't have that large of a team. So you need your players to really carry their own weight. And it really, really start to break down your culture, break down your processes. It can really have a negative impact. So I learned the hard way, fortunately not on my own dime, but I highly encourage you to really, first of all, trust your gut, and really look for those skills. Is that culture is probably one of the most important things to our organization. It's for that reason.
Yeah. How early on in running Continuum did you identify the characteristics or values that you wanted to interview for? Like, did that happen organically as you built the team and you looked around and said, okay, these are the qualities that the most successful people here have in common? Or did you set out initially to only hire people that matched up with certain values?
It's a little bit of both, and it's evolved, of course, over time. There's no doubt anyone who follows me or knows me knows that I have an insanely high expectation, you know, and I don't want it any other way. I remember one time, again, a different organization, different job. You know, I was reporting to the CEO at the time, and I said, I only want to hire A players. And he's like, well, Sabrina, sometimes you can't. And I'm like, well, you're not the right boss for me.
What was his reason as why you can't? Money? Like you can't afford to?
Because he wasn't an A player. Probably. I think it's Steve Jobs who talks about this. I think it is, where he says, you know, B players hire C players because they're intimidated. C players hire B players. Steve Jobs is very vocal, or was very vocal about that. And it's completely true. I want everyone at the table to be wildly smarter and better and more talented than I am. If I'm the best person at the company, we're all in trouble. I can get obstacles out of people's way, help them learn, get them the right resources, but I'm looking for the best in the world. And
at different things, which goes back to the diversity point of like, you need to hire subject matter experts in different areas than you're an expert. You know, you have a background in behavioral analysis and understanding human development, but I can't think of an area off the top of my head that you don't know anything about. But let's say there's an AI expert that's needed, and you go seek that person out. You need the diverse perspectives, and not to be the person at the table that's the know-it-all.
Right. Exactly.
I think women are, you know, not to generalize, but I think women are better at recognizing that sometimes. You know, I feel like we're able to we're more comfortable reflecting on where are our weaker points, and where knowing our strengths. Here's where I bring expertise. Here's where I lack expertise. And we want to bring other people along with us who we know are those experts. I've heard that a lot from the women that I've interviewed, that they're able and they commit to bringing people along to them, like A players bringing along other A players rather than being intimidated by the other A players. I think that's, if we can continue to do that as women, that's going to be our biggest, you know, strategy forward, is being willing to bring others along.
Completely agree. And I think having women, and this has been my experience, I'm sure it's different for others, but women supporting other women.
Yes, exactly.
There's this shift, or has been this shift, at least in my life, where, you know, we are supporting each other. And it's not like, well, there's only so many seats at the table, so I don't want other women there. My greatest, most influential circle are some of the women that that I work with and support.
Yeah.
And it's been a beautiful thing. It's really literally changed my life in some pretty dramatic ways, and as well as other folks at the company, and people that we support. So I'm glad you brought that up.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from the women that I interview. And obviously there's a reason I reach out to those of you who have been on the podcast, is because I admire the work that you're doing and think that you have valuable experience and insight. So that says something, that the women who I feel compelled to speak with on the podcast are all saying the same thing, which is their network of women is incredibly important to them and where they've gotten to this point. And everybody seems to be committed to doing that for other women too. So I agree. It's definitely changing. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. It's such a positive note.
It is. And I will throw this out there. I always say that, first of all, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably one of the best places to find me. But if you have a question, and I can tell you, I probably get at least 1 to maybe 3, 4, 5 a day, questions or people tagging me in their posts when they do something like a subtle brag. It's really important.
Yeah, or your fear forwards. Are folks tagging you in fear for? Share with everybody what your fear forward concept is.
So I love maybe 2 years ago now, I was just sick of being scared of things. I was scared of a little bit of everything, personal, professional. And I just started tackling fears, one fear at a time, including posting on social media. I hated posting on social media.
Same. The only kind of I hated it.
Right? Yes.
It felt so disgenuine. But there's a way to do it that feels awkward. Yeah, it felt forced. But now I have 2024 was my year of fear forwarding on social media.
Awesome. Yeah. See?
Yeah.
I have a whole guide that's free and ungated.
Amazing.
On our website on, breaking down those steps that we call it the art of the subtle brag. How do you do that?
Okay.
In fact, I'll be speaking to Intel in a couple of weeks. I'm doing a workshop for them on that. So I highly encourage it. And I think that's something that all candidates, diverse, non-diverse, everybody should be doing. I think it's incredibly important. And so anyway, so that's a little bit behind my fear forward. I've tackled some of the scariest things in my life and am still doing it. I just had another fear forward yesterday. So it's, it's an interesting mindset that I've taken on. And I think it applies a lot of times to folks looking for new jobs, going, and we see this a lot in women or diverse candidates where they think that maybe they don't qualify for the job.
They can't apply. Yeah.
It's like
100% of the job.
Fear forward.
Yeah. What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. Or as Brene Brown says, what's the best that could happen?
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. So that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so honored to be on your podcast, and thank you for covering these topics. It's so important right now, especially to see all these layoffs and folks hiring. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before you go, you have to answer the question that everybody answers at the end of my show, which is when or where have you felt most empowered as a woman?
Ooh.
It's the heavy hitter at the end.
As a woman, I will tell you, there's been so many times when I didn't even realize that I was being treated differently because I was a woman or because I'm blonde or because of whatever the reason was. Blonde thing's a thing, I have felt most empowered when I have those around me supporting each other. I really, and a lot of it is, it's not just other women, but other men as well. I will tell you, one example comes to mind. I was speaking at Dell Tech World, and I was with a bunch of executives, and I come in and, everyone's kind of sitting around talking, and they said, "Oh, what's a girl like you doing here?" And
they said that.
One of the male, and needless, he doesn't know, what I've done or who I am or any of it. Not that, by the way,
shouldn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all, and nor is it my value as a human being. But fine.
Right.
So one of the other executive leaders there and said, "I think you meant woman, and she's probably smarter than you'll ever be." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
thank you." Not that I want to get snarky or nasty, but I think by saying, what is a girl like you? And I'm like, listen, I haven't been a girl for a long time. But having someone, and I later reached out to him and I said, I want you to know that really stuck with me, that he was willing to say that in front of a group of, I think I was probably the only woman there. Maybe there was one other woman. Same in my legal career. I was very often the only woman in the room. And again, I've always been fairly naive to that. Like, so what? What does that have anything?
Yeah.
Am I good or not?
Yeah.
But I think when other people, not just men, but sometimes men have a position of power, unlike maybe another woman or another candidate, a non-binary, candidate. For him to say that in front of the entire group, he could have pulled it aside. He pulled the person aside. He could have said nothing. Instead, he said, "I think you need a woman."
Did you know him before, or was this another?
I did, not very well,
but at least
I know him. I did know him. He knew of me. I just presented in front of thousands of people. This guy must have just missed.
The other guy missed it.
Maybe, who knows? Or maybe he saw it. He still decided to say that. And you know what? I don't know if he meant it snarky or not. I'm not here to interpret someone else's intent. But I think the most powerful thing about what that man did is he sent a tone and a message to the rest of the people there that in my presence,
this won't be tolerated.
I won't.
Yeah. This is not okay. Yeah. And it needed to, unfortunately, come from him, because obviously the other individual maybe doesn't value your opinion as much. That's kind of what he was setting it up as. Why are you here? I don't know why you would be here to have a seat at the table. So he needed to hear that from another man, unfortunately. But yeah, that's why allyship is so important. And also for you to have to say something, you just got thrown off. If someone said that to me, I would be completely taken aback, probably would run to the bathroom and just be like, I got to take a moment. So it's nice for someone else, like you said, in a little bit of a position of power to just step in and say, that's not okay. So that you don't have to do that after already being the recipient of that. So
I actually responded with a quote from Aristotle. I said, the mark of an intelligent man is being able to entertain a thought without necessarily agreeing with it.
In the moment you said that?
In the moment, yeah.
You came up with an Aristotle quote in the moment. I love that about you.
Like, oh God, well, you know what? I think that's a big part of being a diverse candidate for whatever, I'm an immigrant. English is not my first language, which is always very interesting when you look like me and sound like me to say, yeah, I'm an immigrant, and of course I'm oftentimes generations, decades younger than other people in the room. And of course, then there's this whole thing being a short woman, height. There's a lot of psychology around the power of height and, how people trust you and things like that. So you just have to show up and know what your worth is and your confidence. I'm sure you see that a lot in interviewing and candidates you're recruiting. So yes, I happen to have that, handy, and the whole group got a good chuckle out of it. So I think how you handle things sometimes is really important.
It is. Oh, for sure. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much for being here. It's been a joy to have you on the Career Chronicles podcast. And it's been great to get to chat with you in a couple different ways. We'll look forward to your LinkedIn live session. And if anybody has any questions for Sabrina or I, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll keep an eye on it. But thanks to everybody for being here.